The morning light poured through the high windows of my study, golden and warm, but I felt none of it. Today was the day my daughter was getting married. My daughter. The little girl I had once carried on my shoulders as she giggled. The teenager I had argued with but always supported. The woman I thought I would proudly give away at the altar. I stood before the mirror, straightening the cuffs of my suit. It was not vanity. It was armor. Every stitch represented pride, love, and years of sacrifice. I had worked harder than anyone imagined to give her the life she deserved: private tutors, music lessons, a university that cost more than some homes. And of course, the trust fund I had carefully built, an inheritance of security and love, waiting for her when she was ready to take on adulthood. I arrived at the wedding venue early, a sprawling estate hired for the weekend, its manicured lawns dotted with white roses and golden arches. Guests milled about, laughing and greeting one another, their champagne glasses catching the sunlight. Some recognized me. They smiled politely, though with a strange hesitance, as if unsure whether they should. The air was sweet with flowers, yet beneath it, I sensed something acrid, an unease I couldn't quite name. Then I saw her, my daughter, radiant in her gown, her veil like a halo. My heart swelled painfully. For a fleeting moment, I thought everything would be fine, that no matter the distance between us, no matter her mother's cold whispers, love would conquer. "Dad," she said softly when our eyes met, but there was no joy in her voice, no warmth, just formality. Before I could answer, her mother appeared. My ex-wife, dressed in a gown almost as extravagant as the bride's, her smile sharp as glass. She looked me up and down as if I were an intruder. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low but cutting. "What do you mean?" I was invited. My invitation had arrived weeks ago. I had checked it a dozen times, even called the planner. Her lips curved cruelly. "Things have changed." And then it happened. 2 men in black suits approached me. Security. Realization dawned too slowly, like a dagger twisting before I felt the full pain. "I'm sorry, sir," one of them said, though his eyes betrayed no sympathy. "We've been instructed to escort you off the premises." I stared at them, stunned. By whom? My daughter lowered her gaze. Her silence was the answer. The humiliation hit me in waves. Around us, guests began to murmur. I saw pity in some eyes, curiosity in others, and smug satisfaction in the faces of my ex-wife's new family. The groom's father, tall and self-assured, watched from the sidelines with a smirk that told me everything. This had been orchestrated. My throat tightened as I looked back at my daughter. "You're asking me to leave." My voice cracked. "On your wedding day." But she swallowed, tears threatening her eyes, but she nodded faintly. Whether it was her own decision, or pressure from those around her, I couldn't tell. It hardly mattered. The wound was the same. I walked away before they could touch me, each step heavier than the last. The laughter of guests, the clinking of glasses, the music beginning to play, it all blurred into a cruel symphony. By the time I reached my car, my hands were trembling. My chest felt hollow, scraped clean of hope. I had lost her, not just as a daughter, but as a part of my very soul. As I sat behind the wheel, one thought cut through the haze of sorrow. They think I'm powerless. They think they can erase me. But they had forgotten the trust fund, and they had forgotten who I truly was. The drive home was silent except for the low hum of the engine. My suit jacket felt suffocating, the silk tie like a noose around my neck. I didn't bother to take it off. I wanted the discomfort. I wanted to remember every second of how it felt to be thrown out of my own daughter's wedding like an unwanted guest. When I finally stepped into my house, the silence hit me harder than the rejection. The rooms were too large, too empty, filled with memories that mocked me. The photographs on the mantel, my daughter's toothy grin when she was 7, her first recital, the day she graduated in her cap and gown, all stared down like ghosts. I poured myself a drink, the ice clinking against the glass like the ticking of a clock. My hands shook as I took the first sip, but slowly the trembling turned into stillness. Rage steadied me. How had we come to this? The truth was, the fracture had begun years ago, after the divorce. My ex-wife had always been skilled at weaving narratives. She knew how to drip poison into a young mind with sweet words and half-truths. "Your father is too busy for you," she'd say when I worked late to pay for ballet lessons. "He's controlling," she'd whisper when I set boundaries. Over time, those whispers hardened into beliefs. And yet, I had given everything. Every penny I earned, I tucked away for her. Not for myself, not for vanity. For her, when she turned 21, she would gain access to the trust fund I had built brick by brick, stock by stock, sacrifice by sacrifice. I had imagined it as her safety net, her independence, her freedom from ever having to rely on anyone's generosity. But now I saw it clearly. They had planned this all along. The Groom's family, his father especially, had seen the wealth, smelled it like blood in the water. My ex-wife, bitter and vindictive, had likely handed him the map straight to the treasure. And my daughter, caught between love and manipulation, had been lured into believing that I was the obstacle standing in her way. The humiliation of the wedding was no accident. It was a display, a declaration that I was no longer needed. That they could cut me out, erase me, and still live off what I had built. But they had forgotten one simple, crucial truth. The trust fund was still mine to command. I leaned back in my chair, letting the thought settle into my bones. All it would take was a single call, a single signature, and every plan they had would unravel. No honeymoon dripping in luxury, no new mansion, no gilded lifestyle paid for by my years of sacrifice. I pictured the groom's father's smug face twisting into panic when he realized the money was gone. I imagined my daughter, once surrounded by silk and promises, watching those promises crumble like ash. And yet, beneath the anger, there was sorrow. I didn't want to destroy her. I didn't want to punish her. But I couldn't ignore what she had done, or what she had allowed them to do to me. Love had built the trust fund, but betrayal would decide its fate. I rose from the chair, poured the rest of my drink down the sink, and went to my study. The papers were still in the locked drawer of my desk. Documents of control, the strings that tied everything together. As I laid them out before me, a grim calm settled over my heart. I would not raise my voice. I would not fight in the open. No, my revenge would be quiet, clean, and devastating. Let them believe they had won. Soon, they would learn who truly held the power. The morning after the wedding dawned gray and heavy, as if the skies themselves shared my mood. I had barely slept. Instead, I sat in my study with the trust documents spread before me like a chessboard. For years, I had imagined this day differently. I pictured my daughter glowing with gratitude when she discovered the future I had secured for her. I imagined her freedom from worry, her independence, her pride in knowing her father had always believed in her. Instead, she had chosen to humiliate me, or perhaps more truthfully, she had allowed herself to be used by others to do so. I picked up the phone. My attorney, an old friend who had guided me through every financial twist, answered quickly. "I need the trust suspended," I said. My voice was steady, without hesitation. "Freeze all assets until further notice." He paused. "Are you certain? This will create noise." I've never been more certain. The paperwork was handled swiftly. With a few signatures and formalities, years of planning locked into a vault of silence. By noon, the funds were sealed, untouchable, and then I waited. It didn't take long. 3 days later, the phone rang. The caller ID flashed a number I didn't recognize, but my instincts told me exactly who it was. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello, is this?" The voice on the other end was sharp, impatient. "This is Richard, the groom's father." My lips curved into a bitter smile. "I know who you are." He wasted no time on pleasantries. "We seem to have a problem. My son and your daughter were under the impression that certain funds would be available following their marriage. Imagine our surprise when the accounts came up inaccessible." I leaned back in my chair, savoring every word. Yes, that was intentional. There was silence on the line, followed by a low, incredulous laugh. "You can't be serious. Do you have any idea how much we've already invested in this wedding? The honeymoon, the down payment on their new home." "Not my concern." His voice hardened. "You're playing a dangerous game. That money belongs to them." "To her, no," I said quietly, with the weight of years behind the words. "It belongs to me. I built it. I protected it, and I alone decide when it is given." He bristled. I could hear the control slipping from his tone, anger seeping through the cracks. "Do you know what you're doing to your daughter? You're ruining her life. She'll resent you forever." I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing her face at the wedding, tearful but complicit. My heart ached, but my resolve did not waver. "No, Richard. What I've done is protect her life from men like you." The silence that followed was thick and furious. I imagined him gripping the phone, his face turning red, his perfectly polished plans collapsing in real time. Finally, he spat. You'll regret this. I allowed myself a small, humorless chuckle. I already regret trusting the wrong people. But this is the first decision I've made in years that feels right. And with that, I ended the call. For the first time since the wedding, I felt lighter. Not happy, not at peace, but powerful. They had thrown me out as if I were nothing. Now they would discover just how much something I truly was. The call with Richard echoed in my mind for days, but I did not waver. The trust fund remained frozen, untouched, silent as a mountain beneath the snow. I told myself I had done the right thing, but in the quiet hours of the night, guilt gnawed at me. Had I punished her more than him? The answer came swiftly. A week later, news began to trickle in. The honeymoon had been cut short. The luxury suite in Paris, booked with deposits counting on funds that never came, had been cancelled. Vendors began calling, demanding final payments for the wedding arrangements. The down payment for the new house, rejected. Whispers reached even my ears, carried by mutual acquaintances. The golden couple was not so golden after all. And then came the knock at my door. When I opened it, my daughter stood there. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. The radiant bride I had seen beneath the veil was gone. In her place stood a woman stripped of illusions. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I stepped aside, and she entered. She moved hesitantly through the house, as though afraid of the walls themselves judging her. Finally, she collapsed into the chair across from me. Tears spilled as she spoke. She told me how her new husband had changed the moment the money vanished, how the gentle promises of love turned into harsh accusations, how his father berated her for not securing the trust sooner, for not handling me correctly. Was I just... She choked on the words. Was I just their tit-tit? Their way to get your money? The question cut me deeper than any insult ever could. I reached across the table, my hand covering hers. You are my daughter, my only daughter. You were never a ticket, you were my world. But yes, they saw you as a means to an end. That's why I froze the fund. Not to hurt you, to save you. Her sobs filled the room, raw and broken. Years of distance, of poisoned whispers, seemed to crack apart under the weight of her grief. When she finally lifted her gaze to mine, there was something I hadn't seen in her eyes in years' clarity. Can you ever forgive me? She asked. I wanted to say yes immediately, to pull her into my arms and pretend none of this had happened. But the truth was more complicated. Forgiveness is not a switch to be flipped. It is a slow, painful journey. I can try, I said softly, but you must also forgive yourself. And learn to see people for who they truly are. She nodded, wiping her tears. The silence between us was heavy, but it was no longer empty. It was the silence of two souls beginning, tentatively, to rebuild. As for Richard and his son, I heard later that their debts mounted quickly. Their reputation, once polished and enviable, began to crack. Business partners grew wary. Opportunities slipped through their fingers. Greed, as always, had a way of consuming itself. And me. I didn't celebrate their downfall. Revenge had never been about gloating. It was about reclaiming dignity, about showing them, and my daughter, that I was not powerless, not disposable, not the villain they painted me to be. One evening, as I watched my daughter sit in the garden, her veil of illusions finally gone, I realized something profound. Betrayal had broken me. But in the breaking, it had also revealed the truth, and sometimes truth, however painful, is the sweetest revenge of all.